Welcome to the Coping Podcast, where we share strategies for coping with the stressors of life, especially the difficulties of parenting. And here is your host, Dr. Lee Weiss.
This is a special episode. This is a clip from a webinar we presented called Unlocking the Camp Experience: Essential Ways Parents Can Maximize Their Child's Growth.
Just a quick disclaimer, the information provided is for educational and informational purposes only. This is not intended to provide mental health treatment and does not constitute a client-therapist relationship. The information provided is not a replacement for being assessed and evaluated by a licensed professional and is not intended to replace mental health or medical advice.
The fourth benefit that we want to share that you get from going to overnight camp is digital detox. And I know this is a favorite for many parents. Again, same author, Jonathan Haidt, who I'm referring to a lot. Clearly, you have to read the book if you haven't already. He refers to summer camps as the strongest medicine against the epidemic of youth mental illness. He feels like kids are spending too little time exploring the real world without parents and too much time exploring the online world, which is actually more unsafe than the real world. At camp, the dilemma that parents always face of how do I handle this? Because if my kid's the only one not on social media, they're going to be left out. At camp, nobody has access to screens. So there is no FOMO. You don't have to worry about that. Adults don't have to worry about it, and kids don't have to worry about it. Nobody is left out. All of kids are on the same even playing field. Again, kids are growing up too fast because of the influence of technology and because of certain social media like, Instagram and TikTok that promote likes. Our kids are growing up really worrying too much about what other people think instead of just living the day for themselves. They're taking pictures of themselves. They're filtering it for others' validation. So at camp with digital detox, they get respite from comparisons in social media. It's really freeing.
Kids are teenagers before they can even spell the word teenager, and they're hyper fixated on the latest skincare trends and their appearances, including taking selfies and posting videos of themselves. They're constantly striving to prove to others that they are, quote, on trend. This social media presence at such a young age creates more anxiety and is truly detrimental to them in more ways than one. When kids are at camp, they no longer need to think about what their friends might be doing without them or what they are wearing and what image they are presenting to the world. Their friends are there with them in person, and they start to disconnect from the screen-based persona and begin to discover exactly who they are. While this topic could truly be a presentation on its own, social media has single-handedly robbed our youth of many defining childhood moments, which has led to so many skill deficits. At camp, kids are engaging in only face-to-face interactions and developing skills they will need to interact with others forever. These are basic life skills that are far too many are lacking.
So anyone who's ever seen a child on their electronics knows it's like a vacuum. It's a time suck, right? They could spend hours and be totally content. So without this time suck that technology really is for kids, they spend that same time in real world relationships. They're giving hugs to their friends. They're doing those hand games that are really in sync with each other. They're singing songs around a campfire. They're doing silly cheers in silly costumes, right? And so in these embodied relationships, they're creating deeper and more meaningful relationships that are actually fulfilling to them emotionally because they're engaged in this way. Very, very different from how it feels to be engaged in kind of a superficial group chat. So again, at camp, kids can be really present with their relationship, in part because of this digital detox. And finally, the last top benefit that we're going to talk about tonight for child development of sending your kids to overnight camp is gaining the skill of being independent and learning how to be independent from their parents.
So while at camp, kids get practice making decisions, conflict resolution, emotion regulation without their parents present in an environment that's also supportive and safe. Over the years, social psychologists have seen a shift in parenting practices. This is partly due to the misconception that the world is so much more unsafe than it used to be, and it certainly does feel that way sometimes. While at one time the expectation was for kids to haul water to obtain a family necessity, now so many parents are hesitant to even allow their kids to walk a few blocks to the local store without supervision. This different parenting style is something we've all grown accustomed to, But unfortunately, this bubble wrapping of our kids, as you will, has really backfired. We're now left with generations that are unequipped to handle not just adversity, but even basic life skills. Camp is a great opportunity for both children and parents to get out of this habit of constant contact, and especially for parents, constant reassurance that their kids are okay.
Parents in this generation also have the potential to lose themselves because our lives seem a little bit too centered around our kids. It almost seems sometimes like the more time you spend with your kids or doing things for your kids, the better a parent you are. Of course, we know this is not true, but it is how it feels in this parenting generation. And so parents end up losing time for their own hobbies, their own spouses, their own friends, work, and so forth. And so the time where your kids are away at camp can be refueling to parents as well. It is a time to connect with spouses, family, friends, even with yourself. So in my practice, I see some empty nesters. I see some parents of kids who are off to college for the first time. And when the parents become empty nesters, often it's very common that they feel a loss of a sense of purpose. What do they do with their time? How do they connect with their spouse in this new way, right? They feel like they don't have anything in common anymore with that person. And so, again, the time where your kids go to overnight camp is really a good time to practice creating a space for yourselves independent of your kids. The same is true for kids I've worked with who go off to college for the first time. So, people who are going to be freshmen in college, those who've been away from home at summer camp, even once, even if they weren't like lifetime campers, they feel more confident when it's time to handle this separation than kids who've really only been away from home for maybe 2 nights tops. So again, this is great practice for kids and for parents too. Kids also learn to cope with disappointment without being rescued, right? It's very, very different being at camp and being away from parents because when the stressors happen, parents are not there to swoop in and fix every little problem. So kids have to learn how to cope without parents' help.
Okay, so now we get to the good stuff. Even though your children may be miles away, there are still things that you can do to boost their resilience from a distance. Some of this comes in the form of being okay doing absolutely nothing at all. So in this next part of our presentation, the 4 ways parents can boost their child's resilience from a distance are 1, prep your camper and yourself, let go, resist the temptation to micromanage from afar, promote healthy separation and independence, and prolong the benefits of camp after summer is over. The first way parents can boost their child's experience from a distance is by preparing your camper and yourself.
So hopefully by now, if you're watching this webinar, you have already made the decision to send your child to camp because you feel like they're ready. But now we can discuss with you how you can prepare children for overnight camp in a way that's really constructive. And there are things you can work on now at home with your child to ensure that they're really ready. For example, your child is going to be brushing their teeth and showering independently. Make sure they really know how to do it without you actually showing them the places they're missing, how to rinse the conditioner out of their hair. You're not going to be there to remind them to have a good breakfast. So talk with them about the importance of, giving their body the fuel that they'll need to last all day running around at camp. Help them understand that they need to drink water, to wear sunscreen, things like that. Make sure they know that they can ask adults for what they need and give them some practice speaking up for themselves without your help starting now. Are they ordering for themselves if they're, getting food at a restaurant? And also provide experiences for them to be separate from parents, just so they have a sense of confidence that they can handle it.
So prepare your child for homesickness. If your child is expressing fears or hesitations about camp, you want to appropriately address these as this is a normal way that they're preparing themselves and processing this upcoming new experience. With that being said, we don't want the fears to grow bigger than needed. So find a worry time. This is something we often recommend in practice to discuss these fears or write down a log where a camp director can address the questions or concerns or worries before camp starts so a child feels heard and validated. It's okay, even a good thing, if you don't have all the answers, because thankfully the people at camp will. And you're showing your child that you trust the camp to help them navigate situations that may arise. come up with solutions. And we always recommend making sure that the child is a part of this process, ideally with the camp director as well, and not just the parents. So you're kind of working as a team. For example, a future camper's concerned they'll have nothing to eat for breakfast because they're a picky eater. A solution could easily be getting a list of foods that they'll be served at breakfast, and then the child can pick some of these targeted foods they're willing to try before the camp starts.
Okay, we put a quote up on the screen about homesickness being the norm rather than the exception. And we said a whopping 83% of the campers studied reported homesickness to some degree. Make sure you talk to your kids ahead of time and that they know that it is 100% normal to feel homesick at certain points throughout the summer to varying degrees. While it is uncomfortable to feel this feeling of homesickness, again, remind your kiddos before camp even begins that feelings cannot hurt you, and maybe come up with some things that they can do when they're feeling that way. I also like to help kids imagine the times that they are most likely to feel homesick, even though if we're wrong, that's great. And of course, we tell the child that's great if you don't feel them during these times. But most kids who feel homesickness feel it during unstructured time, like rest hour, before bed, for sure when their parents leave after visiting day. Those are some predictable ones. And of course, they might feel them at other times too. And so think about what they might do if they're feeling this way during one of those times. Maybe they would do string bracelets with a friend, work on a crossword puzzle, read a book, talk to their counselor. And again, encourage them to share their feelings with someone they identify as a supportive other at camp. This is a little snippet from a graphic novel called Camp. And I chose this to put up here because the little girl with the blonde hair says to her counselor, she's feeling homesick, she misses her mom, and she wants to call her mom. And the camp counselor appropriately says, no, I'm so sorry, sweetie. Phone calls are only for emergencies, or I'm sure there's specific times at this camp. But if you're missing your mom, you could write her a postcard. And I was actually going to send some postcards too. Why don't we write them together? And in this situation, this helps this little girl to write a letter and feel connected to her mother. And there's nothing wrong with that intervention. It's a beautiful one. I wanted to point out, though, that sometimes the opposite is true. So some kids, when they read letters, actually feel more homesick. I had a kiddo once in therapy, and she came home with a stack of unopened letters from her mom. She told her mom at the end of the summer, when the mom said, what is this? Unpacking the duffels, that it made her too sad to see her mom's handwriting. And so after she realized this, after the first few letters, she just decided not to open them anymore. And she put them in her duffel bag for the way home for after camp. So don't be insulted if your child isn't writing to you. It's actually pretty smart and insightful if a kiddo realizes that this is a strategy that works for them. And they may not write to you either if writing makes them feel sad, just the act of it. So they might only do those few that are required.
Refrain from making promises to rescue kids from discomfort. Instill confidence and trust in the camp and those adults that run the camp. It's not unheard of for parents of overnight camp campers to receive a letter begging to be picked up to never return to camp again. Whether the culprit is homesickness, an injury, a fight with a friend, desperate moments can cause us to do desperate things. There is even an Instagram page devoted to these letters, as they are often not just dramatic, but also funny in nature. I will always remember my own cousin, who is now a Green Beret, writing home that his only friends were the camp goats. Have no fear, he went on to have a long and wonderful camp experience. However, it can make us as parents feel better and momentarily ease the anxiety of our children to promise to pick them up if they are ever struggling or unhappy. Stop yourself. You need to have confidence in your children and trust in the camp and the capable adults who run it. Camp is not supposed to be, and it's not going to be, a perfect experience. The goal is not to be happy all the time. Your camper will be put in uncomfortable positions. That's part of camp, just like silly, wonderful, happy moments and experiences are part of it as well. And that's a major reason why kids benefit from the camp experience. And this is where the growth happens. Think for one moment about a time in your life when something didn't go your way, but looking back, you grew from it. Hopefully you all have some experience in mind, but we have all had times in our life where we felt disappointment, sadness, frustration. But after we tolerated those feelings, ultimately we benefited because we made the best of the situation and had a positive outlook. For example, a cabin placement that doesn't look perfect on paper, a disappointing role in the camp play, having a fight with a best friend, or getting strep throat the second week of camp without parents there. The possibilities may seem endless, but these bumps in the road actually are opportunities for significant growth, and they need to be reframed as such. If you, parents, intervene and call camp, when you become aware of these hurdles, you're sending a message to your child that you don't have confidence that they can handle the situation, and you're also taking away an opportunity for growth. Meddling in camp decisions not only undermines the leaders at camp that you have entrusted your child with, it also negates the many potential benefits of camp, which we reviewed at the beginning of the presentation.
I was just going to add one thing here, which is that we're teaching kids to sort of sit with these difficult feelings at camp. We're talking about the benefits of that. And we're asking parents to do the same thing. And Michelle and I have been here on the parent end. We get it. It's really hard if you get one of those letters or if you hear that voice in a phone call. But sitting with those emotions is important for parents too.
Thank you for listening to the Coping Podcast. We'll see you again next time, and be sure to click subscribe to get future episodes. And check out our podcast page at copingpartners.com.